Last video, we talked about gold mechanics, how gold is actually shared, where it comes from, and why understanding it can completely change the way you play. But gold is only one part of the game. Today, we're starting something much bigger. Think of it as a textbook for Honor of Kings, not tier lists, not top 5 heroes this patch, just the core ideas and concepts that explain how the game actually works. In today's episode, we'll break down the complete timeline of a standard Honor of Kings match, from the first minion wave all the way to the final push. Along the way, you'll learn the macro concepts that shape every stage of the game. No matter what rank you are, understanding this timeline will completely change the way you look at Honor of Kings. Also, this video has auto-translated subtitles in every language YouTube supports, so if you don't speak English, just turn them on. And if the translation is weird, blame YouTube, not me. Alright, let's get started. The vocabulary. Before we jump into the timeline, there are a few terms you'll hear throughout this series. Understanding these first will make everything else much easier to follow. First, lane priority. Lane priority means having control of your lane. In most cases, it's the player who clears the wave first and is free to move while their opponent is still busy dealing with the minions. Lane priority is one of the most important concepts in Honor of Kings. It determines who gets to rotate first, who can invade the jungle, who can contest objectives, and who has to play defensively. Next, resource points. There are 8 jungle resource points in total. 2 of them are called bilateral resources because both teams can realistically contest them during the early game. On the blue side, the bilateral resources are the Firebeak near the farm lane and the Spiketail Beast near the clash lane. On the red side, it's the opposite. Because these camps are positioned on the outer edge of the jungle, they're much easier to invade or steal than the other jungle camps. That's why many early game fights happen around them. The remaining 6 resource points are located much deeper inside each team's jungle, making them much safer to secure. The Firebeak spawns at the 30-second mark, outside the wall near the farm lane. Because it can't be reached from the other side of the wall, only heroes with long-range basic attacks or abilities can contest it from outside. Melee heroes usually can't help secure or steal the Firebeak during these early fights. Defeating the Firebeak grants bonus gold to your entire team, making it one of the most valuable early game objectives on the map. Lastly, the Space Spirit. Unlike jungle camps, the Space Spirit spawns at exactly the 1-minute mark inside the Primal Portal, a special area located at the corner of the clash lane. Since it's positioned between both teams, it's the first neutral objective that both sides can realistically contest. Defeating the Space Spirit unlocks the Primal Portal, allowing your team to teleport directly to any allied minion wave or allied tower until the 10-minute mark. Now that we've covered these core concepts, we're finally ready to walk through the game's timeline. Minute 0 to 4, laning and early invasion. The first 4 minutes are all about building an advantage. This is the laning phase. Towers are still heavily protected, so instead of forcing pushes, teams focus on securing waves, jungle resources, and map control. At 0:30, 3 things happen at once. The first minion waves meet, the jungle camps spawn, and for the first time, lane priority begins to matter. The team with lane priority can move first, giving them the initiative to contest nearby resources while their opponent is still clearing the wave. The first objective is usually the Firehawk. Since only ranged heroes can contest it over the wall, early control of the farm lane becomes especially important. Securing the Firebeak gives bonus gold to your entire team, creating the first economic advantage of the match. At 1 o'clock, the Space Spirit appears inside the Primal Portal near the clash lane. Securing it unlocks the Primal Portal, allowing your team to teleport to allied towers and minion waves until the 10-minute mark. Once both objectives are on the map, the goal is no longer just clearing waves. It's about converting lane priority into resource control. As a general rule, don't push forward blindly. Instead, secure your own bilateral resource first. Contest the nearby neutral resource, and only then pressure the enemy's bilateral resource if you still have the advantage. If both lanes are evenly matched, forcing an invade usually isn't worth the risk. Simply trade resources and secure your own side instead. 4-minute turning point. At 4 minutes, the game reaches its first major turning point. 2 epic monsters spawn for the first time, the Tyrant and the Overlord. Defeating the Tyrant grants your team a combat buff, while defeating the Overlord summons the First Lord Vanguard. At the 10-minute mark, both objectives evolve into their stronger versions, the Dark Tyrant and the Shadow Overlord. We'll cover those later. The 4-minute mark is important for another reason. It's also the third jungle respawn, and tower protection becomes much weaker. Before 4 minutes, diving or forcing towers is usually inefficient because of the extra tower damage. After 4 minutes, taking towers becomes a realistic objective. This means every team now has to decide what they want to fight for. In most games, the answer is the Tyrant. Securing the Tyrant not only gives your team a combat advantage, but also lets you dictate the next phase of the game. After winning the Tyrant fight, you generally have 3 options. Invade the enemy jungle, continue farming to extend your economic lead, push a tower while its protection is weaker. Any of these choices can be correct. The important part is that the team with the Tyrant controls the tempo. Rhythm war. Now let's look at the other side. What if your team loses the Tyrant? Many players immediately try to defend wherever the enemy is attacking. That's usually the wrong decision. The rhythm of offense is simple. When you're ahead, you keep applying pressure by invading, pushing lanes, and forcing objectives. The rhythm of defense is different. Instead of following the enemy's rhythm, you create your own. This is called changing the half map. For example, if the enemy secures the Tyrant, they'll usually focus on the farm lane side because that's where the objective is located. Instead of fighting them there, pressure the opposite side of the map. Attack the clash lane, contest resources there, force the enemy to choose between continuing their push or responding to yours. That's how you break the opponent's rhythm. You're not trying to stop their momentum head-on. You're creating a new problem that demands an answer. Rather than reacting to the enemy's tempo, you establish your own. That's one of the most important ideas in Honor of Kings macro. Minute 4 to 10. Push and farm. After the first Tyrant fight, the game enters the mid-game. From this point until around the 10-minute mark, the objective becomes much simpler. Push and farm. That sounds straightforward, but this is where many players start making mistakes. Winning fights doesn't automatically win games. You have to convert those victories into waves, towers, and gold. Everything starts with lane management. Every minion wave is an opportunity to pressure the map, so someone should always be clearing a lane. A team that ignores its waves eventually loses map control, even if it's ahead in kills. The jungler usually decides which lane becomes the team's offensive lane, where everyone wants to apply pressure, and which becomes the containment lane, where a teammate simply keeps the wave pushed to occupy the enemy. Most casual games fall into one of two traps. Either everyone is constantly fighting without managing waves, or everyone groups together and pushes only one lane. Both waste opportunities. The standard setup is usually a 4-to-1 formation. 4 players pressure the offensive lane, while 1 player clears and maintains another lane, often the clash lane. This forces the enemy to divide their attention. If they send players to defend both lanes, they're already reacting to your rhythm instead of creating their own. At higher levels, teams often switch to a 1-3-1 formation. 1 player controls each side lane while the remaining 3 stay together in the middle. This creates pressure across all 3 lanes at once. However, this formation only works if the side lane heroes can survive on their own or quickly join a fight. Heroes like Liu Bang or Sun Ce excel here because they can reinforce teammates almost instantly. That's why 1-3-1 is much stronger, but also much harder to execute. Now let's talk about one of the most important timings in the game. The 8 to 9 minute window. Most players think the 10-minute mark is where the next major objective begins. In reality, the fight often starts 1 minute earlier. The second Tyrant spawns before the dark objectives. If your team defeats it around the 9-minute mark, its 90-second buff remains active when the Dark Tyrant and Shadow Overlord appear at 10 minutes. That means your team enters the next objective fight with an existing advantage. Instead of using the buff only for the Tyrant itself, strong teams use it to establish vision, control the river, and prepare the next objective before it even spawns. This is why the 10-minute fight is often decided at 8 or 9 minutes, not at 10. It also explains why professional teams frequently secure the Dark Tyrant first after 10 minutes. And that's exactly what we'll cover next. Minute 10 to 20, breaking high ground. By the 10-minute mark, the game enters its late game phase. Both epic objectives become stronger. The Tyrant evolves into the Dark Tyrant, while the Overlord evolves into the Shadow Overlord. Although both objectives are important, they serve different purposes. The Dark Tyrant helps you win fights. The Shadow Overlord helps you win the map. So why should you prioritize the Dark Tyrant first? The answer is simple. The Dark Tyrant gives your team bonus damage and bonus movement speed. That movement speed makes it much easier to rotate between lanes, invade the enemy jungle, and pressure multiple parts of the map at once. With that advantage, it's much easier to force the enemy back toward their base. Only after you've done that should you look for the Shadow Overlord. Many players make the mistake of taking the Shadow Overlord too early. If the enemy still controls the map, they'll simply clear the empowered wave before it reaches an important objective, wasting most of its value. The correct sequence is simple. Win the fight. Push the enemy back into their base. Then activate the Shadow Overlord. After defeating the Shadow Overlord, your team gains an active skill that can be used on any lane. Using it instantly clears an allied minion wave and creates a shadow path. Teammates standing on that lane deal increased damage to towers and take 10% less damage from enemy towers. Tower protection also changes over time. From 0 to 4 minutes, towers have 25% damage reduction. From 4 to 10 minutes, that drops to 10%. This is exactly why the Shadow Overlord becomes so powerful after 10 minutes. Towers are already much easier to siege, and the shadow path makes pushing even safer. Breaking the high ground is usually the hardest objective in the entire game. Not because the towers are stronger, but because the defenders have a huge positional advantage. They can instantly heal at the fountain, return to the fight within seconds, and rotate freely between all 3 lanes. The attacking team has to travel much farther, making every mistake much more expensive. To consistently break the high ground, there are 2 key concepts. The first is the interception line. Instead of allowing defenders to regroup, cut off their rotations before they can reach the tower. The second is the escort push. Have your front line protect the minion wave while the rest of the team advances together. Without a minion wave, the siege stops. With one protected by your team, the enemy has a much harder time defending. Once the high ground falls, the final objective is simple. Push all 3 lanes at the same time. Eventually, the defending team won't be able to cover every lane, giving your team the opportunity to destroy the crystal and end the game. Vision. Vision is one of the most overlooked mechanics in Honor of Kings. On the surface, it's simple. If 2 heroes are close enough and there's no wall between them, they reveal each other's position. The difficult part isn't understanding how vision works. It's knowing how to use the information it gives you. The first rule is simple. Vision is mutual. If you can see an enemy on the minimap, they can usually see you as well. That's why the goal isn't just to see your opponent, it's to see them before they see you. The easiest way to do that is by using bushes. When you enter a bush after attacking, you don't disappear immediately. It takes about 1 second before you're actually hidden. Don't rely solely on the eye icon above your hero. Seeing the icon doesn't necessarily mean you've already disappeared from enemy vision. There's still a brief delay where they can continue to see you. Once the eye icon turns yellow and fully opens, you're completely revealed, and the enemy has full vision of your position. The same applies when attacking someone inside a bush. They don't disappear instantly either, giving you a small window to continue tracking or attacking them. Understanding this timing lets you reposition, disengage, or set up another attack before your opponent realizes you've disappeared. Another important interaction involves damage. Passive effects and certain basic attack effects don't reveal your position. However, most active AoE abilities do. For example, if Tyrant fires his ultimate into a bush and hits someone inside, that player is immediately revealed. So hiding in a bush doesn't always guarantee safety. Because bushes play such an important role, learning every important bush on the map is essential. Most competitive teams even give specific names to each bush, making communication much faster during a match. Defensive vision. Defensive vision is about gathering information before the enemy reaches you. Instead of reacting after an enemy appears, position yourself to watch the routes they're most likely to use. River entrances, jungle paths, and major objectives are the most important areas to control. Most successful ambushes happen because nobody was watching these routes. Offensive vision supports your team's pressure. If your mid laner has lane priority and wants to rotate, your teammates should control the bushes and jungle entrances ahead of them. That allows your mid laner to move freely, while making it much harder for the enemy to predict where the next attack is coming from. Good offensive vision creates uncertainty. The enemy knows someone is missing, but they don't know where they'll appear. Development vision. Development vision protects your team's economy. During the laning phase, towers naturally provide vision around nearby areas. Once a tower falls, those safe areas disappear. That makes it much easier for the enemy to gank your farm lane or invade your jungle. Instead of simply standing next to your marksman, help secure the nearby bushes and jungle entrances so they can safely clear waves and continue farming. Real protection doesn't come from standing beside your carry. It comes from giving them enough information to make safe decisions. Once you understand vision, you stop reacting to the map. You start controlling it. Advanced rhythm. Now that we've covered vision, we can finally talk about rhythm at a deeper level. The objective of every MOBA is simple. Push forward. You can't win without taking towers, and you can't take towers without controlling the map. The faster your team controls the map, the faster the game ends. The question is, how do you create that control? The answer is by gradually shrinking the enemy's playable area. This is called half-map pressure. Imagine your team wins the mid lane. Instead of stopping after clearing the wave, use that advantage to move your vision and your players into the enemy's farm lane side of the map. Control the bushes. Pressure the jungle entrances. Force the enemy farther and farther back toward their own towers. As your vision expands, their safe area becomes smaller. Eventually, they can't comfortably farm, rotate, or contest objectives anymore. That's what half-map erosion really means. You're not just taking space, you're taking away the enemy's options. At the same time, your own side of the map becomes safer. Your marksman can farm without constantly worrying about ambushes, while the rest of your team continues applying pressure. This is how good teams maintain rhythm. Poor teams often make the opposite mistake. They win the lane, then immediately back away. The pressure disappears. The enemy regains vision. They clear the next wave. Suddenly, all the advantage you earned is gone. The problem isn't mechanics. It's that the rhythm stopped. Remember what we learned in part 2. When one team controls one half of the map, the losing team shouldn't try to force a fight there. Instead, they should immediately pressure the opposite side. This creates a new rhythm that the winning team now has to answer. Good macro isn't just about following the tempo, it's about forcing the enemy to follow yours. To execute this consistently, your roam plays a crucial role. Before your marksman rotates to pressure another lane, the roam should already be there controlling vision and securing the wave. Only then should the marksman rotate, collect the wave, and convert it into tower pressure. Another common example happens right after securing the Tyrant. Sometimes your composition isn't strong enough to immediately siege a tower. Instead of forcing the push, apply double pressure. One pressure comes from threatening the lane. The second comes from threatening the nearby jungle, especially if its camps have just respawned. Now the enemy has to make a decision. Defend the tower, or defend their jungle. Either choice gives something up. And that's the real goal of advanced rhythm. You aren't trying to force one perfect play. You're creating multiple threats until the enemy can no longer answer all of them. Clip position. Everything we've covered so far, lane priority, vision, map control, and rhythm, leads to one moment. The team fight. No matter how well you control the map, sooner or later you'll have to win a decisive fight. One of the most important concepts in team fighting is clip position. Think of it as trapping the enemy instead of simply attacking them. The goal isn't to dive in as quickly as possible. The goal is to limit where the enemy can move. A proper clip position forces the enemy backline into a small area, while your front line blocks their escape, and your assassin looks for an opening to eliminate the carry. That's why positioning is usually more important than engaging first. At higher levels of play, teams rarely start a fight the moment they see an enemy. Instead, they spend a few seconds finding the right positions. The front line controls space. The damage dealers stay in safe positions. The assassin circles around to threaten the enemy's backline. Only after everyone is in position does the fight begin. This is why professional team fights often look slow at first. The real battle starts before anyone even uses a skill. Once your front line commits, the enemy's attention shifts forward. That's the moment your assassin or flanker moves into the clip position. With the enemy distracted, reaching the backline becomes much easier, forcing them to either retreat or split apart from their front line. When that happens, your team controls the fight. Good team fights aren't won by having faster mechanics. They're won by creating better positions before the fight even starts. Everything we've learned in this series, from lane priority and objective control to vision and rhythm, exists to create that one winning position. That's the foundation of Honor of Kings macro. If you've made it this far, congratulations. You now understand the fundamental concepts that shape almost every game of Honor of Kings. From here, we'll start going deeper into each topic, one chapter at a time. See you in the next lesson.